Hello students, welcome to the MOOC course on Indian economics. Today's topic is industrial growth, employment generation in India in recent years. Before the arrival of the British ruler in India, the industrial base of the country was very strong. It was even stronger than the Western European countries. The British ruler came and they systematically destroyed the industrial base of our country. As a result of it, during independence, we inherited an economy with very weak industrial base and underdeveloped infrastructural facilities, as well as it was a stagnant economy. So after independence, the government of India took an initiative to improve its industrial base. And industrial conference was called in 1947 and initiatives were taken to harness industry in the livelihood of the people of the country. In 1948-49, the bill was passed to establish Industrial Finance Corporation in India. At the same time, industrial policy resolutions were taken. The significant changes started to occur in industries of India from the second five-year plan, which actually gave emphasis on the improvement of the industries of the country. The second plan was based on Mahalanobis and Nehru planning, and in that plan, more emphasis was given on the establishment of capital and basic industries in the country. And we all know that for the development of our country's industry, how capital and basic industries are necessary. So, in the second five-year plan, initiatives were taken to establish those capital and basic industries in the country. And it was expected that development of those capital and basic goods industries will trickle down to other sectors of the country. When the production of a country improves, at the same time it generates employment in the country. Along with this, the structure of employment also changes with the development of the country. In case of India, when initiatives were taken by the government to improve the industrial base of the country, the output of different sectors that also increased, and along with these outputs, employment also started to be generated in different sectors of the economy. And this at the same time, in case of India also, the structure of employment also changed. That means percentage of the agricultural sector in employment generation that reduced, and percentage of the employment generation in industries that increased over the period of time. But however, along with this structural changes, unemployment, absolute number of unemployment also increased. That is because of the reason of lack of job creation in the country, and this type of growth is known as jobless growth. In this module, we will discuss how the industrial sector has developed in the country, as well as how employment has generated in the country over different periods. Especially, I will emphasize on the recent years. Industrial development of the country, that can be discussed by dividing the period into mainly 5 phases. phase 1, that is from 1951 to 1965. That means this phase was basically for the building up of strong industrial base of the country, and this phase covers the first 3 plans. The second phase is from 1965 to 1980, and this period is known as industrial deceleration and structural retrogression. Phase 3 is from 1981 to 1991. In that phase, that phase is known as the period of industrial recovery. The fourth phase is from 1991 to 2016-17. That means post-liberalization period. And this phase also can be divided into 2 phases that I will discuss later. And the fifth phase is post-COVID period. Now I will discuss these 5 phases in details. First phase, as I have told you, that the first phase is from 1951 to 1965. That covers the first 3 plans. And in my introductory section, I have already mentioned that in the second plan, initiatives were taken by the government to create a strong industrial base in the country. And for that purpose, development of the capital and basic industries were started. And as a result of it, the cumulative growth of industries during the first 3 plans was very high. The figures are given in my notes, and the most significant growth of the capital and basic industries, that was the most significant part of this phase, because this development creates a strong base, industrial base of a country. The second phase is from 1965 to 1980, and this period basically covers 2 plans, 4th plan and 5th plan. It is basically marked by sharp deceleration in industrial growth. And in this period, as we will see that in this period, the growth of capital industries was very slow. And similarly, the growth of basic industries were also very slow. And as we know that for industrial development of a country, its capital and basic industries are very important, and as those industries development was very slow, this in this period, we have seen deceleration in the industrial growth in this period, and this also created structural retrogression in that period. And the reasons for this slow growth of the industries was mainly the external factor, that means the war of 1965 and 1971, oil crisis of 1973, as well as there was some drought in the country. These all were the reasons for slow growth of the industrial sector of the country. And according to Ken Raj, the slow growth of the industries was also caused by slow growth of the agricultural sector at that point of time, because when agriculture growth slows down, it also slows down the demand for industrial product, as well as it also supplies less amount of inputs to the industries. Third phase is basically from 1981 to 1991. This phase is known as the recovery period. That means in the second phase, we have seen that industrial growth started to slow down. Then again from 1981 onwards, this industry started to recover from its slowdown period. And in this period, the industrial growth was almost 6.4% during 1980-85, and it was 8.3% in 1991. And the reasons for this recovery was the new industrial policy and growth of the agricultural sector and growth of the service sector and also infrastructural facilities. Now coming to phase 4. Phase 4 basically it is from 1991 onwards. That means post liberalization period. And the measures of liberalizations like reduction in the licensing policies and reduction in the influence of the public sectors, etc. These are the measures that actually influence the industrial policy in India or industrial development in India. Now, this fourth phase can be discussed by dividing the entire phase into two sub phases or sub periods, and these two sub periods are the first period is from just after 1990s, that means the period up to the 9th plan, that means from 1991 to 2001 to that means up to 9th plan, and the second sub period is from 2002-3 to 2016-17. That means this second sub period covers 3 plans, 10th, 11th and 12th. Now let me first discuss the first sub period, that is the period up to the 9th 5-year plan. During that phase, the industrial growth rate was almost 7.4% and 5% in 8th and 9th plan. This indicates that the development or growth rate of the industries during this period actually fluctuated, and the reasons for these fluctuations are exposures of the industries to the external competitions and anomalies in the tariff rates and export competitions and sluggish growth in exports and contraction in the consumer demand, infrastructural constraints, etc. Now the second sub periods, that means the period from 2002-3 to 2016-17. In the 10th plan, the growth rate was 8.2%. And again in the 11th plan, the growth rate was 6.9%. So we can see that the growth rate fluctuated between the plans. And if we study the data in details, we will observe that within a particular plan, the growth rate of industries that also fluctuated over different years. So, the economic survey of 2011-12 that reported that the growth rate of industries fluctuated in India during that period of time, and they identified that capital goods sector and intermediate goods that fluctuated the most, and that those fluctuations in the capital goods and intermediate goods was the reason for fluctuations of the industrial growth in our country. And the industrial growth during that period was very much uncertain, and the reason for the slow industrial growth or fluctuating industrial growth was lack of investment during that period. Now coming to the phase, that fifth phase, that means the phase after the COVID period, and if we observe, we see that the performance of the country or industrial in performance, if we measure it through gross value added measures, we will see that the gross value added contribution that has improved in 2018-19 from 2017-18, and the real GVA of the industrial sector has shown a slow growth in 2019-20. It was almost 1.6%, and the reason for that slowdown of the gross value added measure is the slowdown of the growth of the manufacturing sector. Now the year 2020-21 that started in the middle of the COVID period, and we all know that in that period different measures were taken to manage the situation, and those measures actually affected the industrial growth of our country. And those measures were like lockdown, etc., and restrictions of the movement of commodities and people from one place to another place, and all those things actually affected the industrial development of the country. And data shows that during 2020-21, the gross value added growth that reduced to minus 9.6%, and the contribution of industries that also reduced during 2020-21. And after the period from 2021-22, the economy actually started to recover, and the gross value added measure that also started to recover. If we see, we will observe that the growth of the GVA was 11%, and the contribution of industries also increased in 2021-22. Another index, that is index of industrial production, also used to measure the performance of industries in the country. Now, if we see or if we analyze the index of industrial production of the country, we'll also observe that in 2017-18 and in 2018-19, the growth rate of GVA was moderate. But in 2019-20, the growth rate of this IIP, that means index of industrial production, that was very low. It was almost about 0.6%. And the reasons were also the slow growth of the manufacturing sector, and that slow growth of the manufacturing sector is basically because of the slower credit inflow to the medium and small industries, reduced lending by non-banking financial companies and that created liquidity crunch in the country. And all the other reason was tapering off of the domestic demand in sectors like automotive sectors, pharmaceuticals, machinery, equipments, and volatility in the international crude oil prices, etc. At the same time, exports of key labor-intensive sectors such as gems, jewelry, basic metals, leathers, etc., that also underperformed during 2019-20. And obviously, as expected, the IIP growth rate also falls steadily during that period, and in the month of March or month of April and March, the growth rate was lowest. And again, when the economy started to recover in 2021-22, this index, IIP index, that also recovered from the previous year. Another index that is used to measure the industrial performance of a country is the index of 8 core industries. And these 8 core industries are coal, crude oil, natural gas, refinery products, fertilizers, steel, cement, and electricity. These 8 core industries basically contribute almost 40% of the 40% weightage to the IIP index, that is index of industrial production. Now, growth of this index of 8 core industries, that was also slowed down during the period April to November 2019, and which was 5.1% in 2018-19, that fall down to almost minus 37.9% due to COVID-19. However, again, as the GVA measures and IIP index, this ICI index, that means index of 8 core industries, that also started to grow after 2021-22. That means when the economy started to grow. Now I will discuss employment generation in India. In recent years, there has been a deceleration in employment generation in India. If we analyze the data in recent years, we'll observe that up to 2011-12, though the economy was growing at a very fast rate, the employment generation rate was very slow. And that phenomenon can be explained by using the concept of employment elasticity. Employment elasticity basically shows the capacity of a country to generate employment as a percentage of its development or its growth. Now, up to 2011-12, the employment elasticity was 0.04%. And the data of employment in India is basically available from NSSO surveys. NSSO means National Sample Survey Organization, and that organization actually conducts household surveys, and they conduct those household surveys and in different rounds, and emphasizing on a particular sector of the economy. And employment data is available from the 55th, 61st, 66th and 68th round of the NSSO data. And there are two concepts in NSSO data. First is labor force, another is workforce. Labor force is basically means the number of people who are actually seeking work, whereas workforce is the amount of people or the number of people who actually get the employment. So if we see the labor force data, we'll observe that after liberalization period, the labor force actually has increased in significant amount in India. And up to 2004-05, the increase in labor force was very high. During 2004-05 to 2009-10, the increase in this labor force was actually slowed down. But again, from 2009-10 to 2011-12, the labor force was created almost 12 million people. And as compared to this labor force, the workforce was always lower than the labor force, and the gap between these two actually indicates the unemployment rate. And in India, this unemployment rate was actually increasing over the period since 1991, that means since the liberalization period. And there was a little bit improvement during 2011-12. And another component of employment generation is job creation. If we observe the data, analyze the data, we'll see that the number of jobs created is very low as compared to the economic growth. During 2004-05 and 2009-10, we have I've just mentioned that during that period, labor force growth increase in labor force was not very fast, or it was slow. However, at that period, the total number of job creation was very low. And from the NSSO data, we'll see that there was a improvement during 2009-10 and 11-12, and at that period, job creation also increased. And from that, after 2011-12, job creation and employment situation actually started to improve in India. And at that period, various measures were taken by the government, and those measures actually encouraged or improved the employment generation in India. And those measures were, first of all, encouraging the private sector to cater into the economy, and various policies were taken. First is Prime Minister's Employment Generation Program. Second is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, Pandit Dinadayal Upadhyay Gramin Kaushalya Yojana, and Dinadayal Antyodaya Yojana National Urban Livelihoods Mission. And as a result of these policies and changes in policies, if we see the data from 2011-12 to 2017-18, we'll see that there was an increase in the number of salaried workers during that period, and almost the rate was 5%. That means during 2011-12, salaried workers were 18%, which increased to 23% in 2017-18. And salaried person increase in the number of salaried person is important for the aspects of an economy, because it indicates that the jobs are basically formalizing. And in absolute terms also, there was a significant jump in new job creation during this period. And among the self-employed category, while the own account workers and the employers increased during the period, and the proportion of unpaid family laborers are decreasing during this period. Now, I will discuss the structure of the employment, and as I have mentioned in my previous sections, that structure of employment is very important because changes in the structure of employment basically indicates how the country has developed over the years. And when the share of agriculture that reduced and the share of industry started to improve in employment generation, that indicates a good sign for a country. And for India, though there has been a decline in the employment in the agricultural sector in percentage terms, however, the absolute number of people engaged in agricultural sector, that was very high. That was not at all declining up to 2004-05, and from 2004-05 that absolute number also started to decrease. That actually indicates that the country was growing. And the second thing was that the absolute number of employed or workers were increasing in the manufacturing sector. However, the percentage of the manufacturing sector in total employment generation, that was not increasing. And the third point is that the sector which has registered steady fastest growth in the employment generation, that was the construction sector. And as a result of economic reforms in 1991, there has been a substantial increase in employment in transport, storage and communication, and financing, real estate and business services. Now, data shows that the percentage of there was a structural shift occurred in Indian economy. However, the quality of the jobs those are created, that are not improving. That means the jobs those are created, that was actually casual in nature, and casual jobs does not provide the benefits and the other benefits to the workers. So the quality of job was not actually improving over the years. Another thing was, with introduction of GST, digitization of payment, direct benefit transfers, and opening of Janadhan Yojana, extending social security coverages to more workers, that actually improving the formal employment. During 2014-15 to 2017-18, the total number of workers engaged in industrial sector, that was almost 14.69 lakh. Now, we will see how COVID-19 has impacted us on the employment generation. We all know that because of this COVID-19, restrictions were created on the movement of people as well as commodities from one place to another place, and that was taken to manage the situation. And as a result of this, the mostly affected were the urban casual workers, because they lost their jobs, and we all have seen how they have suffered. In newspapers and in televisions we have seen that how they suffered and how they migrated, and that was actually a reverse migration, and how they migrated from one place to their native place. And during May to August 2020, almost 63 lakhs of workers traveled through Shromik special trains. In the first quarter of the 2020-21, unemployment rate that rose to almost 21%. And again, when the economy started to recover, that situation also started to change, but we do not have the data to see how or to analyze how the workers in that period of time and during the COVID period, how the migrant worker has suffered. We do not have exact data on that. Now I will conclude. In the entire discussion, we have discussed how the industry has developed over the period of time, starting from the planning period. Especially we have emphasized on the recent years, and also we have discussed how employment situation has changed, how structural changes has occurred in employment, and in this regard, government has taken many steps. They have invested in the small and medium industries to encourage employment. And the most important thing was Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, that means Self-Reliant India Mission. Now, through this Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, this mission, the government announced a special economic and comprehensive package of 20 lakh crore rupees to fight the COVID-19 situation, and that amount was actually 10% of the total GDP.